Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Zakarian. I'm one of the instructors for the Chicago Real Estate School. And what we're doing today, we have a series of videos following all the chapters out of our 10th edition textbook. So I'm going to be following this textbook. I am going to cover all the math for you as well. But just to start off with, I want to give you some little bit of information. I'd like to talk about the course itself. Now, again, my name is Sam Zakarian. If you need to reach me by email, you could reach me at sam.reacademy@yahoo.com, or you also could call the school anytime you want. Contact them at support@realestateschoolchicago.com. Now, on the state exam, you will have a total of 105 questions. You will get it's broken down into two parts. We have the national portion that has 105 questions that covers chapters 1 through 15 out of your textbook. And you need a 70% score to pass that one. The Illinois law portion contains 45 questions, covering mostly chapter 16, but also 11 and 13. And you need a 75% on that one. Now, you have 4 chances to take the test. If for some reason you pass the national and not the Illinois law, then all you have to do is just retest on the Illinois law. If you pass the Illinois law portion, but not the national portion, then you have to test on the national portion. As long as you do everything we tell you to do, you should be fine. So let's get back to our textbook. So, all right, now, if I ask you to put an X next to something, that's something you should do because those are questions that you'll probably see on a state exam. Also, if I tell you to highlight something, make sure you have a highlighter with you. If not, just underline this information. And anything I put up on a screen, make sure you copy that because that's very important as well. Now, in order to qualify to take the state exam, you must complete all the chapter quizzes, must attend all the classes as well. And then watch the videos as to help you prepare for it. As we go on later on, I will help you with giving you some tips on preparing for the state exam. All right, so let's get started. We're in a textbook. Again, it's the 10th edition. Let's go to page 1. The first few pages is just more of an introduction. So starting where it says the brokerage business, our business, it's not really finding houses because houses are out there. Our business is finding people that have a real estate need, a need to buy, sell, or invest into real estate. One of the things you should do, if you haven't done this already, because I tell my classes from the very beginning, make sure you contact everyone you know. As I said, this is a people finding business. Let them know that you're getting your real estate license. You're going to be licensed in a matter of just a few weeks, and they will wait for you. A lot of people that enter the real estate business, they get their business from their close friends and relatives. So go to Hotspot, go to Facebook, go to Twitter, and let everyone know that you're going for your real estate license. Because I'm telling you, they will wait for you. The next paragraph, they talk about the appraisal. Appraisal process is very important. We covered that in chapter 7. It's very important that a real estate agent price the property correctly. Sometimes sellers want to try a lot more money. Can we try the market is hot? There's not a lot of properties on inventory. Can't we try a little bit higher? Problem is that people who, if you go over what the value of the property is, you're going to wind up missing the market completely. Besides that, an overpriced listing is going to cost you, the agent, more time, effort, energy, and money just to try to get that property sold. So I'm just saying price property correctly. Property management, that's another specialization in real estate. In order to manage property for someone else, you need a managing broker's license. Again, we'll cover that later on and mostly in chapter 16. A lot of people are getting into the investment of buying real estate. They don't know how to manage and they need property managers. Financing. Financing is very important in the real estate market. It's very important that before you take a client out, that you make sure that they've been qualified by a lender. Pre-approved is even better, pre-approved by a lender. A biggest mistake that a lot of agents make, someone might call them on the phone, hey, I saw this sign on this property, can you show me the property? Without checking to see how much they qualify for, they run out there, they show them the property. Buyer loves that property. They love it very much and they want to buy it. So you bring them back to the office and then you have them qualified and find out that the property just showed them is they're asking $350,000 for it. But guess what? Then now they qualify for only 300. Now you're going to have a problem because everything they're going to look at that they could afford at the $300,000 price, they're going to wind up comparing it to that first home you showed them, which is at 350. It's not going to work out. They're not going to be pleased with anything. Very important before you take a client out, you have them pre-qualified, pre-approved, even better again, by a lender. Next one is subdivisions and developments. A lot of those are going on in the Chicagoland area, but not on a big scale because lenders kind of leery about what happened, that they don't want to lend out a lot of money on that. So what happened, they're doing a lot of projects, but on a much smaller scale. You see a lot of 6 and 12 units going up or condo for even, 20, 25 units, not too much on a bigger scale. Home inspections. Home inspections are very important. It's always encourage your buyers to get a professional home inspector. I mean, they are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. They need to spend another $350, $400 to get a certified home inspector because they will spend around somewhere between 3 to 4 hours checking everything, the doors, windows, outlets, water pressure, the appliances. So always encourage them to get a professional home inspector. The homeowners now who waive the home inspection because they just want to make their offer a little bit stronger, 80% of those people have regrets that they did not get a home inspection. It's just to let them know exactly what they're buying. Counseling. Counseling is very important. This is at the bottom of page 1. Counseling is so important that um, I don't list and sell. I manage a big company right now, but I don't list and sell. But when I did, I would never take a client out unless they will meet with me for about 45 minutes to an hour before we even look at one property. I want to find out everything that they're looking for in a home. I want to know their wants, their needs, their desires, the benefits they're looking for in a home. I have them qualified at that point. I just want to make sure that I'm not going to be wasting my time showing someone 100 homes. There's no need to go out there and show someone 100 homes. Actually, you only had to show them one home if it's the right home for them. So make sure you spend the time counseling, find out exactly what they're looking for. Let's go on to page 2 at the top. They talk about education. Now, education, what they have is there's a lot of designations that a real estate agent can achieve through the board and through classes with different schools. And I'm talking about becoming a residential specialist, working with commercial property. I'm talking about working with empty nesters, people that are retired and they don't need that big house anymore. Working with distressed properties. There's a lot of different specializations that a real estate agent can get. Become an expert in a certain neighborhood. Become the condo king, the condo queen in a certain neighborhood if they prefer. And then auctioning. Now, auctioning, well, I kind of tell my agents kind of stay away from that because a couple of different types of auctions. We have absolute and reserve. Now, absolute auction, whatever the highest price is, the seller has to accept. But in many auctions, or what they call reserve, the seller's sitting there in the front row, and if they don't get the price they want, they're not going to sell. They don't have to sell. Also, a lot of times you can't even inspect these properties. And they also, the bad thing about this is they make if you bring in your buyer to buy this property, a lot of times not only do they make you pay the commission for yourself, for the buyer's agent, but also for the listing agent too. So be careful about doing auctions. I mean, there's a lot of properties, like mostly commercial shopping centers, office buildings, large apartment buildings, but now they're getting more into the residential property too. Now, other types of real property towards the bottom of this page, I want you to be real familiar with this. I like you to highlight, put an X by all these 5 bullets at the very bottom of the page. So the first one is called residential property. Now, residential property, I'm talking about single family homes. I'm talking about 2, 3, 4 units, long as they're owner occupied, and also condos and townhomes. That all fits into residential property. The next one is called commercial. Commercial is shopping centers, office building, apartment buildings, 5+ unit apartment buildings is included with commercial. Next, we have industrial property, which is factories and warehouses. Then we have agricultural, and agricultural is farms and ranches. And then we have special purpose property. And those are properties that don't fit into these other 4 categories. It could be any government building, schools, libraries, police stations, courthouses, also places, stadiums, cemeteries, any house of worship. So anything that doesn't fit in these categories will fall into special purpose. Just to let you know, you're going for your broker's license right now. As a broker, you're able to sell all types of property, everything I just mentioned over here, all types of property. You must work for a sponsoring broker, but I'll give you that information as we go on. Now, let's go on to page 3. At the very top of page 3, you can highlight the first couple of lines. Supply and demand. Now, supply and demand in the real estate market, well, actually applies to any type of commodity that exists out there. If there's a greater supply of any commodity, houses, or it could be butter, it could be sugar, it could be anything, but there's no demand for it, then what happens? Prices come down. If there's a shortage of supply, but more of a demand, prices go up. Just remember, price always follows demand. Now, supply and demand in the real estate market, we have 2 things here, uniqueness and immobility. Uniqueness means that no 2 properties are the same. I mean, you can have properties that look identical, but they can't occupy the same space. That's what makes them unique. And immobility, you cannot move land. Actually, later on in this chapter, very shortly, we're going to get into a little bit more detail about this. Now, about the middle of the page, where we have labor force and construction costs. A shortage of skilled laborers out there and an increase in cost of construction material is going to drive up the houses. Now, the houses, since the pandemic, because shortage of material, or a lot of people just doing a lot of remodeling in their home, have driven up the prices of construction material by 50%. It costs 50% more to build a home today, the cost, than it did back in 2019, 2020. Next one is government controls. Government controls, we're talking about building codes, zoning falls into that, zoning ordinances. Again, we'll get into detail in chapter 3 about that one. Government financial policies, we're going to talk about that in chapter 6. Government financial policies, we're talking about Federal Reserve Board and how they control the money and the prime rate, and we'll cover that again in detail about lending money. Now, the next paragraph where it says government agency, we're talking about FHA, Federal Housing Administration, and the Veterans Administration. FHA allows people to buy a home with only 3.5% down. VA, any veteran, could buy a home for no money down. VA has the highest loan-to-value ratio of any organization out there, of any loans that are available out there. Now, the VA loan is not just for veterans, but someone that's active in the military. They're able to use their VA benefits as long as they're in good standings. Again, that's going to be covered in a lot more detail when we get into chapter 6. Now, let's go on to page 4. Factors affecting demand, the population. As the population grows, the demand for housing grows too. People need a place to live. The next paragraph you can highlight, it talks about demographics. People getting married, they want a home, or they having children, they need a bigger home. That's what the demographics are. Or They're getting divorced. People getting divorced. They need to sell one home, then they need to buy two homes. Usually, a lot of times, divorced couples, they want to make sure the kids stay in the same school. They have separate bedrooms. They're happen to be 4 blocks away from each other. Employment and wage levels, that next paragraph you can highlight. Now, employment and wage levels. People must have a job. They must have a job. They must file their taxes so they could get pre-approved by lender to buy a home. That's what they need. So, let's go on to real estate is defined at. I could highlight, put an X by the next two paragraphs. Real estate's defined at land at, above, and below the earth's surface, plus anything that's permanently attached to it naturally. We're talking about like grass and trees. So when you own land, not only do you own the surface of the land, you own the airspace above your land all the way into infinity, and you also own the land underneath all the way down to the center of the earth. That's what's included with the definition of land. The next paragraph where it says real property, highlight, put an X by the next two paragraphs right there. Now, in the definition of real property, you have everything that's included in the definition of land, and also anything that happens to be attached to it, whether naturally or artificially. Naturally, again, is grass and trees. Artificially is anything added by man, a house, a fence, a garage, a water line, a sewer line, a sidewalk. All becomes part of the real property. And it is included in your definition of bundle of legal rights. Now, air rights, the last paragraph, you got to highlight that. Again, when you own property, not only do you own the surface of the land, you own the airspace above your land all the way into infinity. Now, just because you own the airspace, you can't stop planes from flying over your home or charge them a fee for doing that. But we're talking about like if long as you get the proper permits, you can build up on your property as well. Now let's go on to page 5. The second paragraph, ownership of real property. We're talking about your bundle of legal rights, and your bundle of legal rights is included in the definition of real property. Your bundle of legal rights is included in the definition of real property. Your bundle of legal rights, I will highlight, put an X by 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number 1, possession. When you own property, you have a right to occupy your property. That's possession. Number 2 is control. Control means do whatever you want with the land within the law. I mean, if you want to tear down your home and build something else, you need to pull a demolition permit. Then you have to get building permits. Do anything you want within the law. Number 3 is called enjoyment. If you own property, you have a right to enjoy the property however you see fit. Number 4 is exclusion. Exclusion means you have a right to keep others from entering your property. And then the last one is called disposition. Disposition means that you could get rid of your property however you want. You could sell it. You can lease it if you want. You can pass it on in a will upon your death. You can let your children inherit it. That's disposition. So your bundle of legal rights is including your definition of real property. And make sure you know these 5 right here. Now, 2 paragraphs down where we have personal property. Before I get into personal property, I mentioned earlier that anytime you attach anything to the land becomes part of the real property. Anytime you build a house, it's part of the real property. Anything you attach to that house, your kitchen cabinets, your carpeting, anything else like that becomes part of the real property. Now, if you own a home and you got pictures hanging in your house, well, when you move, you could take the pictures with you. That's considered personal property. But the nail that was holding the picture on the wall is considered real property, and you cannot take the nail with you. Anytime you attach anything to real property, whether it's a nail, glue, screw to the floors, walls, ceilings, becomes part of that real property. Now, if you have drapes hanging in your home, you want to move, you can take the drapes with you. The drapes are hanging on these little hooks, but the rods that are holding the drapes up, they would have to stay behind because they're attached. So anytime anything's attached, it becomes part of the real property. If you live in an apartment and you're renting an apartment, and let's say you decided that maybe you didn't like the or maybe you put it by one of those home entertainment centers, for the TV and whatever else. And just for safety, afraid if your child might climb on it and might fall down, you put a couple screws and anchored it to the wall. Well, guess what? As soon as you did that, it now becomes part of the real property. You cannot take that with you. If you're renting an apartment, for some reason you don't like the light fixture, and you decide to change it, well, guess what? That now belongs to the real property. You cannot take it with you. So anytime anything's attached, it becomes part of the real property. Now, personal property. Personal property is anything that's not attached. Your clothing, your computer, your artwork, your clothes, all that's considered personal property. Anything that's movable. Now, I'm going to put down a couple of examples of personal property in just a few minutes. But let's skip down a little bit. Under plants, number 2, fructus industrialis. We're talking another name for that is emblements. Emblements. Emblements are growing crops that need planting, watering, nurturing, weeding on a regular basis. They just don't grow naturally. I'm talking about crops like corn or wheat or beans. Those are considered personal property. Now, farmland in the state of Illinois is only sold at 2 times, before planting and after harvesting. So there's no dispute as to the crops. But let's say now that I own 3,000 acres of farmland, and I sold my land to you. But before we closed, I planted some crops there. I planted the corn. And before we closed, the corn already started growing and started sprouting. And maybe it's only an inch high, the corn. Because it started growing before we closed, it is considered personal property. I have a right to come back and harvest those crops that season. I can't come back every year, but that's what I could do. So emblements are considered personal property, growing crops that need planting, nurturing, and harvesting. Now, at the very bottom of page 5, it says conversion. Now, conversion is converting real property into personal property, or personal property to real property. So let's go to page 6 at the very top, severance. Severance is the process of converting real property into personal property. Something's attached to the wall, screwed in. If I unscrew it, even though it's still sitting there, as long as I unscrewed it, I just converted real property into personal property, and that process is called severance. 2 paragraphs down, where it says annexation. Annexation is the process of converting personal property into real property. That's called annexation. Let me give you an example. I want to put up a fence in my yard for my dog. So I go out to the lumber yard, I buy the fencing material. It's personal property when I buy it. I bring it home, I throw it in the back of my truck, and I bring it home and I lay it on the grass. It's still personal property. But the moment I set the post in the ground, I attach the fence to the post, I just converted personal property into real property. That process is called annexation. Okay. Now, fixture. I'd like you to highlight and put an X by that one. A fixture is an item of personal property that's been so attached to the real property that by law becomes part of the real property. An example of a fixture: heating systems, plumbing systems, lighting systems. I mean, these lights in this room here were at one time personal property, but once they're installed, they become part of the fixture and they become part of the real property. Now, legal tests of a fixture. Now, courts use these 3 tests, and you can highlight 1, 2, and 3 to determine whether an item is real property or personal property. The first one, number 1, is called method of attachment. How permanent is the method of attachment? Number 2 is agreement between, adaptation to real estate. Is it being used as real property or personal property? And number 3, agreement by the parties. Have they agreed in writing whether it's real or personal? These are very vague, and that's why courts are backed up for years trying to determine whether property is real or personal. It is very important that um, you make sure when you, as a licensed agent, when you list a property, that exactly what's there is going to stay or not stay. Because sometimes a seller will have a beautiful chandelier hanging in their foyer or maybe in their dining room, and they would tell the agent, "When I move, I'm going to take this with me. This beautiful $5,000 chandelier, but I'm going to replace. I'm going to put some other light fixture in it." Well, in fact, when every buyer comes by to see that property, the agent tells them, "Oh, the seller's going to take the foyer dining room, foyer chandelier with them, and they're going to replace it with another light fixture." They always tell them that. So what happens is, and they put in a contract, exclude foyer chandelier to be replaced with another light fixture before closing, and they put that in the sales contract. Well, day before the closing, we have what we call a walkthrough. And at the walkthrough, it takes about 10, 15 minutes. They look at the property and that beautiful 5,000 $5,000 chandelier is gone. And in this place is some light fixture. It came out of Home Depot, cost about $150. Guess what? Now they don't like the house in. It doesn't look the same. And then they get this idea, why don't we have the agents all chip in and pay for a new chandelier? Let each of the agents throw in $1,250, let each of the sponsoring brokers drop in $1,250 or have his $5,000 chandelier. See, as an agent, when I was an agent, what I do is if a seller says they're going to take something with them, I would ask them, okay, you want to take this four-year chandelier with you? How long is it going to take you to get your electrician here to come and exchange it? Well, it might take me a week. All right. We're not going to list this property for another week, not till this is gone. But see, there's people see something, they want it. You know, there's an old saying, fear of loss is a greater motivator than the opportunity to gain. So that's why if they see it, they want it. I don't want them to see it. So I take that out because I don't buy chandeliers. I've never bought a chandelier. Now, the very last paragraph of this page, they talk about trade fixtures. Highlight, put an X by that. Usually you're going to get somewhere from 3 to 5 questions on the state exam on trade fixtures. And you can highlight, put an X by number 1 at the bottom of this page. And we have 2 and 3 on the next page as well. Now, anything used in a trade or business is considered personal property. What I did say earlier in this tape was that anytime you add anything to real property, it becomes part of that real property. But trade fixtures, you rented store space from me, and you're going to open up a business, and you bring in your counters, your shelving, your equipment, and they're affixed to the walls, to the floors, and everything else. But because they're using their trade or business, they are considered personal property and always remain personal property until the lease expires. So, just to let you know, trade fixtures are considered personal property. Not when they're installed. They always remain personal property, even if they're installed, even if they breach the lease, even if they defaulted on the rent. The only time they become real property is when the lease expires. So let me go over something with you right now. Let me get my whiteboard up. I'm working with a board right now. Let me see, I can't I have trouble getting to this thing. 1 second. There we go. I'm getting to my whiteboard. Going up. I just want to point out something to you, very important. Oh, sorry, it's just taking a moment. As I said, anything I write down, take a screenshot, copy it down. It's always good. It's loading up, I guess, because this is the first chapter. It might take a minute. Okay, now we should be able to do this. Okay. Now, Personal property. Let me write this down for you. It's kind of hard to write with this. I'm sorry. I hope you can read my writing. Personal property is anything that's not attached. Now, another name for personal property that you'll see on the state exam, the word is called chattel. Chattel. Another name for personal property. Emblements that we talked about before, growing crops is considered personal property. Trade fixtures, anything used in a trade or business, not fixtures, but trade fixtures. It's also considered personal property as well. And remember, trade fixtures are always personal property, remain personal property until the lease expires. Again, I want to stress this because you're going to see this on a state exam. Not when they're installed. When they're installed, they're still personal property. If they breach the lease, they're still personal property. If they defaulted on the rent, they're still personal property. I mean, if you live in an apartment and you did not pay your rent, your landlord cannot go into your apartment and remove your, personal items in there. They can't do that. Another name for personal property is, they call it personalty. That's the word they call it. So I want you to be familiar with this. All right, let's get back. Textbook. Now, on page 7, under characteristics of real estate, there are 7 paragraphs there. I need you to highlight and put an X by all 7 paragraphs because you are going to see this on a state exam. There are 4 economic characteristics of real estate, and there are 3 physical characteristics of real estate. Now, on a state exam, they try to get you mixed up as to which ones are economic, which ones are physical. So please pay attention to this. The first one is scarcity. Land is scarce. 71% of the earth is covered by water, which means that the land that's left over, sometimes you cannot do anything. You cannot build anything on it. You know, you're up on a mountaintop, you're in the middle of the desert or on an ice tundra. Land is scarce. The second one, and make sure you have X's by all 7 paragraphs here. The next one is improvements. By making a improvement to your property, by building a house, a building, a shopping center, whatever you build, you add value to your property. But not only do you add value to your own property, you also add value to the surrounding properties as well. The next economic characteristic is called permanence of investment. Now, what that means, permanence of investment, that when you build something, whether it's a house, a building, you expect it to be there for a long time, for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. You're not building a house today and to have it removed the next year. And then the last one is location. This is on the economic ones in the middle of the page. They say in real estate, the 3 most important things in real estate: location, location, location. Okay, I want to buy a home in Chicago. My location is Chicago, but I don't want to live in downtown Chicago. You can't find parking, it's crowded, it's noisy. I want a quiet neighborhood of Chicago. My location is Chicago, but my area preference is that quiet neighborhood of the city. Another name for area preference, the word is situs. S-I-T-U-S, situs. It's Latin for site. So those are the 4 economic characteristics of real estate. Probably more important are the 3 physical characteristics. The first one is called immobility. You cannot move land. You cannot move land. I mean, you live in a house on the ocean front. When you look out the front window, you see a beautiful view of the ocean. You look out the back window, you got a beautiful view of the mountains. But if you sold that property and you move, you can't take that view with you. Immobility. The next one is indestructibility. Land cannot be destroyed. You cannot destroy land. I mean, you could burn down your house and your grass and trees, you still have the land. You could go on your land with 1,000 dump trucks and a payloader, and you can remove tons and tons and tons of dirt from your land. And you know what you own right now? Land with a big hole in it. Cannot destroy land. Then the last one is uniqueness. As I said, there are no two properties that are the same. I mean, you have two houses next to each other and they look identical. What makes them unique? One's occupying the space over here, one's occupying the space over there. They can't occupy the same space. You look at a condo building, hundreds of units. You say, oh, they're all the same. No, they're not. They're occupying a different space. One's occupying the space over here, one's below, one's next to it, one's behind it. So that's what makes property unique. So be careful. As I said on the state exam, they try to get you mixed up, which ones are economic, which ones are fiscal. So just be very familiar with those. Now, let's go on to page 8. About 2/3 of the way down on page 8, where it says specific real estate laws, like it to highlight, put an X by the next 3 paragraphs over there. Now, every state has real estate licensing laws. And the purpose of real estate licensing laws is to evaluate the competency of people engaged in a business for the protection of the public, not the protection of us, for the protection of the public. As I said, we're going to cover the law as we go along. Now, at the very bottom of page 8, home ownership, ownership expenses, and ability to pay. Now, owning a home, there are expenses. Not only just with the utilities, but you borrow money to buy a piece of property, you have to pay that money back. You have to pay it back with interest. You have property taxes. You have to have homeowners insurance. There's maintenance on that property. So there's a lot of expenses. Now, what a bank does, and if we go to page 9, you could highlight the first couple of lines at the very top and under mortgage terms as well. You could highlight, put an X by that one. See, when a bank lends out money, you have to be qualified because they want to make sure you could afford that property. The very last thing a bank ever wants to do is to foreclose on your property. It costs them money to foreclose. A bank makes their money by you making your principal and interest payments every month. So banks have certain qualifications in order for you to buy a home. So again, let me go to my chalkboard. And let's see. It might take me just a moment to load up. Yeah, unfortunately it does. I want to switch it to. Okay. We're coming on, just bear with me. Now we're on page 9. It started on page 8. We're on 9. So I'm going to show you about the qualifications as to a bank, what they do to make sure that you could afford that property. This thing's going a little bit slow, so just bear with me. Again, as I write down anything on this chalkboard, as they call it, make sure you copy it. Make sure you understand that. I'm going to go cover all the math for you while we're waiting for this thing to load up. I am going to cover all the math for you. You have 10 questions on a state exam, but I'll make sure that those are all covered for you. Okay, now you should see my chalkboard. Now, let's take an example. Let's say that a person has a job, and let's say they earn $96,000 a year. This is before any taxes are taken out. So you take the gross income that they make a year, you divide it by 12 months. And that's going to equal $8,000 a month. Now, qualification ratios for a conventional mortgage, they say that no more than 28% of your gross monthly income, again, before any taxes are taken out, goes towards your monthly housing cost, PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. No more than 36%, I'm on the left side of the screen, goes towards what we call PITI, your monthly housing cost, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, plus any long-term debt. Long-term debt are things that are not going to be paid off in the next year. I'm talking about car payments. I'm talking about credit cards, student loans. It says team, but that's an R. I'm sorry, I have to make that very good. Writing on a chalkboard. And I'm looking at the screen as my hand's doing something else, writing on this thing. So no more than 36%. So, all right, $8,000, going back to the right, upper right-hand side, $8,000 times 28% will give me $2,240 a month. That goes towards PITI. So let's take our principal's amount of money that you borrowed. Principal, and you had to pay that money back with interest. So let's say both the principal and interest comes out to $1,500 a month. Oops, 1,500. Then we have property taxes. Your property taxes come out to, say, $500 a month. And let's take homeowners insurance. Insurance in case your house burns down, in case if someone falls down your steps, you have to have that homeowners insurance. And let's say that comes out to $180 a month. Well, now if I total all this up together, what I get is $2,280 a month. And if you look over here, this is your PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That's your monthly housing cost. Well, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's not 2,200, it's 2,100. So 2,180. We're under the 2,240. So we're good on the front end. Now let's go back on the right-hand side of our screen over here. And $8,000 a month, gross monthly income. And now we have to qualify on a second portion on the back end, which is PITI, your monthly housing cost plus any long-term debt. So we multiply that by 36%. And that comes out to a total of $2,880, $2,880. Cannot exceed that. You have to qualify on both ends. Otherwise, you're not going to get the mortgage. So let's look at long-term debt. Again, things are not going to be paid off in the next year. Let's say you have a car payment. And that car payment, let's say it's, what did I put in here? I use the number $400. It's a cheap car. I just read someone that has a car payment of $1,200 a month. That's like a mortgage. I don't know what kind of car this guy bought. Now you have credit cards. You have credit card payments. And let's say your credit card payment comes out to $200 a month. And let's say you have a second car payment, and that comes out to $350 a month. Second car payment. It comes out to $350 a month. Well, now if I total all these up together, I'm going to get a number of $3,130. Well, look, I'm over the 2880. I'm over that. You're not going to qualify for the loan. Now you like this house, you really want this house. Get rid of one of these car payments. Get this card, pay off, sell it, pay it off. You reduce your payment down to instead of 3130, comes down to I think it came out to 2780. You now qualify. They said go and buy that. The lender will tell you go and buy that car after you close. It's easier to get financing on a car than it is on a home. So just make sure you know this. Let me now get back to textbook. All right. Now investment considerations. You can highlight number 1 and 2. Purchasing a home offers several financial advantages. A possible long-term gain through appreciation, and then increase in equity as the mortgage is paid off. Now, equity is the difference between the value of your home and what you owe on your home is called equity. The difference between the value and what you owe on your home is called equity. You build up equity several different ways. Every time you make a mortgage payment, you're making I think I had $1,500 a month. A majority of that is interest. In the beginning, most of that is very little principal, but eventually, as time goes on, more goes towards principal. So every time you're making a mortgage payment, you're reducing the amount that you owe. You build up equity by making improvements to your property. Anything that's going to add square footage. You finish off the attic, you add a bedroom, bathroom. You also build up equity just by the neighborhood, or just by the neighborhood appreciating in value. That's how you build up equity. Equity is the difference between the value and what you owe on your property. So determining seller's equity, you can highlight those 4 bullets there. You can go over those on your own. Now we have tax benefits. Tax benefits of owning a home. It says homeowners may deduct from their income, and you can highlight, put an X by number 1, 2, and 3, some or all of the mortgage interest payment. You're able to deduct property taxes and certain other expenses like points and loan origination fee, other closing expenses you're able to deduct. Let's go on to now page 10. Capital gain exclusion. Like it to highlight and put an X by number 1, 2, and 3. I want you to remember this. I'm going to go back to my chalkboard. And again, I'm sorry, it just takes a moment to download this chalkboard. Let me see if I got it. I forgot it. Oh, I did figure out a new way. I did quickly. Okay, now I'm back on my chalkboard. Okay. Now, here's what you need to know. That every homeowner in this country could get a certain amount of taxes that they don't have to pay on their property, on the profit of the sale of their property. Now, what you need to know that if you happen to be single, you get a $250,000 exclusion that you don't have to pay taxes on. I'm going to give you an example in a moment. If you happen to be married and you're filing jointly, you will get a $500,000 exclusion on the profit on the sale of your property. Now, there is a rule that you must live on the property. I'll write that all down. Oops. Must live on. Sorry about the scribble. I hit a wrong button. Property for 2 years out of the last 5 years. Out of the last 5 years. This first time I used a chalkboard in years. It's got my penmanship will get better. But let me give you an example of something. Let's say that you bought a home and years ago, you paid $100,000 for it years ago. You sold it today for 400,000. What you did is you made a profit. $300,000. Guess what? You have to pay taxes on that $300,000. You're going to pay taxes as if you made that money, ordinary money, like on a job or anything. And just say, for example, you happen to be in a 25% tax break. I'm just making that up. It could be 32, it could be 28. I don't know. Let's say it's 25%. It's just easier to figure out. You have to pay $75,000 in taxes. Now, what I want to show you, let's take the same situation. You sold your property for 400,000. You paid originally 100,000. So you made $300,000. Now you lived on this property for at least 2 out of the last 5 years, at least 2 out of the last 5 years. Well, you're going to use your capital gain exclusion. Capital gain exclusion. And let's say you're single. So you get a $250,000 exclusion. You don't have to pay on the first profit of $250,000 on this property. The balance you will, in this case, being $50,000. And let's say that you're still in a 25% tax bracket. Well, 25% of 50,000 will come out to $12,500 instead of 75,000. That's what you have to pay in taxes. By the way, if you are married and filing jointly, you will not have to pay anything at all, nothing at all. And you're allowed to do this every 2 years. Now, the thing on a state exam about this is that most homeowners would not have to pay any taxes on the sale of their home. So, be a little bit familiar with that. Now, let's go on to page 11. We're going to talk about exchanges. So let me get rid of this whiteboard. Okay, on page 11, highlight, put an X by the first 2 paragraphs there. We're talking about exchanges. This is also called the 1031 exchange, tax deferred exchange, okay? Tax deferred. I'm going to give you a drawing. I'm going to draw that out for you in a little bit. But, well, you know what? Let me draw something out. Let me bring my whiteboard out because I think writing something down will help. So let me clear up my whiteboard. Now, this I want you to be familiar. And what I'm going to tell you is really, really good if you're working with investors. This is called the 10. See if I can get this and get a bigger pen. So this is called the 10. Let me just cross this out. The 10 didn't work. 31 tax deferred exchange. Now, this refers to any investment property. Any investment property. Now, I'm talking about any investment property. I'm talking about a 200-unit apartment building, office building, a 400,000 square foot office building, a large shopping center. This even refers to if you have a one-bedroom condo as a investment, also refers to that as well. Now, let's say you have an investor who bought a piece of property and they paid many years ago 600,000. This is a 600, okay? $600,000 is what they paid for it. And they years ago, and they sold it today for $2 million. Well, they made a profit of $1.4 million. They had to pay taxes on $1.4 million. But guess what? IRS says that if they took that money and invested into another property, they could defer the taxes. I'm not saying you're not going to pay the taxes, but you could defer it to years down the road. The rules are you have 45 days. I'm writing this on the right-hand side, 45 days to identify as many as 3 properties that they want to invest in. And you have 180 days to close. Now that 45 days is including that 180 days. I mean, if they just sold it and took this money, they're going to have to pay probably close to $400,000 in taxes. But if they took that money and invested into another property, they bought a building for $5 million, they could defer their taxes to a later date. So now, let's say they don't want to invest an entire 1.4 million. They want to take a couple hundred, 200,000 out. They want to pay down some debt. They want to put money aside for their child's college education. They can take cash out. Now, any cash taken is, I'm writing too fast, I think, is called, they call it boot. That's what they call it. It's in those paragraph. So any cash taken, they want to take 200,000, pay down some debt, whatever, and reinvest the other, that's fine. But boot is taxable. So they could take money out, but they have to pay taxes. So, and why this is good, because you have a seller wants to sell his building, but he doesn't want to pay all the taxes. We could do something. We could defer the taxes. We could defer it to another time. That's why you have to let them know. Now, under tax deductions, the next section, you can highlight the next 5 bullets. It says homeowners may deduct from their gross income any of the following. The first 2 are the most important. Real estate taxes is the first bullet. Second bullet, mortgage interest payments on most first and second homes. Not if you have 3 or 4 or 10 homes on the first and second home. Now, just be careful. Unless you're a tax accountant or CPA, do not give any tax advice to anybody. Do not go beyond your scope of authority. Do not give legal advice unless you're an attorney at law. Okay. So I just sometimes agents want to do everything and they kind of cross the line there. I don't want them to do that. Now, at the very bottom of page 11, they talk about homeowners insurance, co-insurance clause. So highlight the last couple lines over here, and it continues on the next page. Homeowners insurance. Now, those of you that own a home, the day you close on that property, you have to come in with a insurance policy paid for 1 year in advance. And whose name as the insurer is the lender in case the house burns down. The lender is going to get paid what's owed to them, and then anything left over will go to you if it's a total loss. So that's why they require that. And then they're going to figure out what your payments are per month. They divide it by 12, and then you make that payments. That's part of that PITI as well. Now, just to let you know, homeowners are never insured for the full 100% replacement of the property. They're only insured for 80% replacement. To get 100% replacement, it's going to cost them a lot more money. Instead of costing them like $3,000 a year, it could cost them, like 10 or 15,000 a year. And besides that, insurance company's not going to give you more money than the property's worth. But you only have 80% replacement value. So if your house burns down to the ground, there's nothing left. The bank's only willing to give you 80%. You still own the land, right? Remember, land cannot be destroyed. That's why we have 80% replacement. Now, in the middle of page 12, we have federal flood insurance program, and you can highlight the next 4 paragraphs. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers have put together this huge map of the United States, and if anyone buys a home in certain areas by these river that's located in what they consider a floodplain area, they're going to have to get flood insurance in addition to the homeowner's insurance. Now, as an agent, you don't have to look this up. The lender will look this information up for you. Now, in the Chicagoland area, we do have a couple of places that are located in the floodplain area. We have homes that are built near the Des Plaines River and also out west by the Fox River. But again, you don't have to look this up. The lender will tell the buyer if they're in a floodplain area if they need additional insurance. Flood insurance usually costs maybe about I don't know, maybe another $1,500 to $2,000 a year. That's what it costs. And it looks like that is the end of chapter 1. If you're looking for me on other chapters, make sure you do the quizzes at the end of chapter 1. Keep up with the quizzes, all right? Use this as a review. Again, make sure you copy everything that I put down. I'm Sam Zakarian again. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.